You probably know someone this happened with. 1 month they're in every group chat, showing up to every dinner, texting you at midnight about nothing. The next month, nothing. No fight, no dramatic falling out, no final conversation. They just went quiet, and then quieter, until one day you noticed you couldn't remember the last time you'd actually heard from them. When you reach out, the replies come back slow and flat, if they come back at all. It feels like a door closed somewhere in the house and nobody told you it was closing. And the strangest part is how sudden it seems, like a light switch flipped off inside a person you thought you knew all the way through. Here's what this teaches you about people, and it's bigger than one lost friendship. When someone suddenly cuts everyone off, it almost never happens in the moment it looks like it happened. The switch you saw flip was wired weeks, months, sometimes years before your hand ever reached for it. What looks like a sudden exit is usually the last page of a long book that nobody else was allowed to read. Over the next few minutes, we're going to walk through what's actually happening inside a person who does this, the real psychology underneath the silence. And by the end, you'll understand something most people get completely wrong about the friend, the family member, or the partner who vanished on them. There are a few different engines that drive this, and here's the part to hold on to. They usually run at the same time. It's rarely one clean reason. Let's start with the quietest engine of all, the one you can't hear until it's already done its work. Call it the silent ledger. Most people who cut everyone off are not impulsive. They are, if anything, the opposite. They've spent years being the reliable one, the easy one, the person who absorbs the small slights and lets them go so the peace stays intact. But letting something go on the outside is not the same as letting it go on the inside. Every canceled plan, every unreturned favor, every time they swallowed the comment that stung gets quietly written down in a ledger nobody else can see. They keep smiling. They keep showing up, and the whole time, a number in the corner of the page is climbing. Psychologists call this resentment accumulation, and it works like a slow leak in a tire, not a blowout. You don't feel the air leaving. You just notice, one cold morning, that the tire is flat and you have no memory of the nail that did it. To everyone around them, the cutoff comes out of nowhere. To them, it was the most predictable thing in the world because they'd been watching that number climb for years while everybody else was watching them smile. That's why the classic line these people give is so haunting. I'm just tired. Not angry, not accusing, just tired. What they mean is that the ledger finally hit a number they couldn't carry, and the cheapest way to stop the weight from growing was to put the whole book down and walk away from everyone whose name was in it. Now here's the second engine, and it lives much deeper, in the body itself. For a lot of people who go no contact, closeness doesn't register as safety. It registers as threat. This traces back to attachment, the blueprint we build in childhood for what love is supposed to cost us. If early closeness came bundled with unpredictability, with a parent who was warm 1 hour and gone the next, the nervous system learns a quiet lesson it never forgets. Getting close to people is how you get hurt, so the safest move is to need no one. Therapists call this an avoidant attachment style, and the key thing to understand is that it's not a decision, it's a reflex. When intimacy gets too warm, too demanding, too real, some deep part of them slams a valve shut to protect against a wound that was carved long before you ever met them. Watch what that reflex feels like from the inside, and it starts to make sense. As the friendship or the relationship deepens, they don't feel the glow most people feel. They feel a rising pressure in the chest, a subtle claustrophobia, a voice that whispers you need to get out before this costs you. So they pull back, not because you did anything, but because the closeness itself tripped the alarm. Family therapists have a name for the extreme version of this: emotional cutoff. It's when a person manages the discomfort of an unresolved bond by simply severing it, going cold and distant, instead of doing the exhausting work of staying and sorting it out. The cutoff feels like relief. The pressure drops, the alarm goes quiet, and in that quiet they mistake the absence of anxiety for peace, when really it's just the silence of a room they've emptied. Here's where it gets more uncomfortable, because the next engine isn't about pain at all, it's about power. Think about what it feels like to be in a situation you can't control. A job where your effort disappears into a void. A family that keeps casting you in a role you outgrew a decade ago. A friend group where the same dynamics grind on no matter what you say. For someone who feels powerless in the places that matter, there is one lever they can always reach. One button that is always, completely theirs to press. They can leave. Cutting everyone off can be the single most powerful act available to a person who feels powerless everywhere else. For once, they are not the one being left, not the one being overlooked, not the one waiting for a text back. They are the hand on the switch. Psychologically, this is control-seeking, dressed up as withdrawal, and it can feel intoxicating to someone who has spent their whole life feeling like weather that things happen to instead of a person who makes things happen. The tragedy is that the same act that finally makes them feel powerful is the one that leaves them completely alone. They win the argument by emptying the room, and then they have to live in the empty room. The fourth engine is the one people judge the harshest and understand the least, and it's simply this: the tank is empty. We talk about social energy like it's infinite, like a good person should always have more to give. But connection has a real cost. It takes fuel to text back, to remember birthdays, to show up, to be present, to care about someone else's day when yours is on fire. When a person slides into depression, or burns out, or gets crushed under a load nobody can see, that fuel runs dry. You can watch it happen in the smallest detail. The phone lights up on the table with a name they love, and instead of warmth they feel a flicker of dread, because even that tiny kind text has become one more thing being asked of a person who has nothing left to give. So they let it sit. They tell themselves they'll answer later, when they have the energy, and later never comes, and the unanswered messages pile up into a wall of guilt that makes reaching back even harder. And when there's nothing left in the tank, relationships aren't the first thing to go. They're the only thing that can go, because everything else, the job, the rent, the basic act of getting out of bed, is non-negotiable. So they don't choose to abandon people. They run out of the exact resource that being a friend requires. This is why so many cutoffs cluster around the hardest seasons of a life: a loss, a diagnosis, a slow collapse into anxiety or depression. It looks like they stopped caring. Usually the truth is the reverse. They cared so much, for so long, on an empty tank, that the caring is what finally broke. Isolation isn't the villain in that story, it's the symptom. And the cruelest part is that the withdrawal makes the depression worse, which makes the withdrawal deeper, a spiral that from the outside just looks like someone who decided, out of nowhere, that you weren't worth the effort. That brings us to the fifth engine, the one that's less about escaping pain and more about becoming someone new. Sometimes a person cuts everyone off not because they're running from a wound, but because they're running toward a version of themselves they can't build while the old crowd is watching. We become who we are partly through the mirror other people hold up to us. Your oldest friends remember exactly who you used to be, and that memory can quietly hold you in place. So when someone decides to change in a way that feels enormous, getting sober, leaving a marriage, walking away from the family business, coming out, starting over in a new city, they sometimes conclude, consciously or not, that the old self and the old people are stitched together, and you can't shed one without shedding the other. Psychologists talk about identity foreclosure and reinvention, and the ugly middle of that process often looks like a clean break. They're not rejecting you as a person. They're rejecting the version of themselves that only exists in the room with you, because that version is the one thing standing between them and who they're trying to become. So let's step back, because this is why it actually matters, and why understanding it changes how you carry it. Notice what every single one of those engines has in common: the silent ledger, the fleeing nervous system, the grab for control, the empty tank, the reinvention. In every case, the drama the person is living through is happening on the inside, in a world you were never shown. And that creates the single most painful feature of being cut off, the enormous gap between how it feels to them and how it feels to you. To them, this is the climax of a long, private story, a story with chapters and build-up and 100 small moments that led here. To you, it's a single, baffling event with no chapter 1, no warning, no scene where you could have said the thing that would have kept them. You're handed the last page of a book and expected to understand the ending, and of course you can't, because you were never allowed to read the rest. Which leads to the payoff, the thing most people get wrong and spend years torturing themselves over. When someone suddenly cuts everyone off, your instinct is to make it a story about you. What did I do? What did I miss? What is wrong with me that I wasn't worth a goodbye? But look back at those 5 engines and you'll notice something. Almost none of them are actually about you. They're about a ledger you couldn't see, an alarm wired in childhood, a hunger for control born somewhere else entirely, a tank you didn't drain, a self they're trying to escape. The cutoff is not a verdict on your worth. It is a delayed reaction to a weight they carried alone for a long time, and it finally caught up with them at the exact moment you happened to be standing there. It looks sudden because you're only seeing the collapse, not the years of strain that made the collapse inevitable. And that reframe matters for a second reason. Whichever side of this you're standing on. If you're the one who got left, Understanding these engines is how you stop bleeding on a wound that was never really about you. You can grieve the friendship without accepting the false story that you were disposable, because that story is almost always wrong. And if you're the one who feels the pull, who can feel your own hand drifting toward the switch right now, understand what you're actually looking at. That urge to disappear on everyone rarely fixes the thing underneath. It just relocates you to a quieter place to feel it, alone. The ledger doesn't get lighter when you burn the book, it just stops being anyone else's problem to help you carry. And the closeness that feels like a threat is often the exact thing that could have healed the wound that taught you to fear it. The healthier move is almost never the total silent vanishing. It's the hard, unglamorous conversation. The boundary spoken out loud instead of enforced with a wall. The one honest sentence, "I'm overwhelmed, I need some space, and I don't want to lose you to do it." Because here's the last thing worth knowing, and it's oddly hopeful. Most cutoffs are not doors that lock. They're doors that swing shut in a moment of overwhelm, and a surprising number of them can open again once the pressure drops, once the tank refills, once the person feels safe enough to look back. The people who vanish are rarely as certain as they seem in the instant they go quiet. They are exhausted, or scared, or drowning in something they never learned how to say out loud. And if you can hold that truth, that the silence was almost never about your worth and almost always about their weight, then whichever side of the door you're on, you get to stop asking the question that keeps you up at night and start asking a better one. Not what's wrong with me, and not what's wrong with them. Just, what were they carrying that got too heavy to hold and speak at the same time? If this helped something click into place, do me a favor and hit like and subscribe so the next one finds you too.